Now on to second baseman. A little bit of an odd position because a lot of the players that seem to do well hitting are not as good defensively, and some of the players that are not as good hitting are great defensively and great on the bases. So ranking some above others just seemed weird. The confidence I have in my picks here is marginal, but I think we can make a solid case for a lot here. I think what everyone agrees on is a consensus top three. I think everyone kind of has the same top three, depending on order. But yeah. So I'll start with second base here. My number 10 is kind of a newer guy to the class of the position, but I was kind of impressed with what he did this past year, and I'm talking about Bryson Stott, who was a shortstop in 2022, and then the Phillies signed Trey Turner. So Bryson Stott moved over to second base, and he made a very good transition. He was 7th in F4 among second basemen, with 50% of the games played at the position last year. 7th among them in F4, which is the whole package. And when considering that whole package, I'm talking about a 104 OPS plus, 17 outs above average, 6 defensive runs saved, 31 for 34 on stolen base attempts, and a 49% extra base taken rate on the bases. Was also 5th among all fielders in outs above average and 2nd among second basemen in BSR. To get into some of the improvements he made from 2022 to 2023, he had some very encouraging drops in whiff rate, strikeout rate, and pop-up rate, and had an increase in sweet spot rate that put him 71st percentile. Also, he's a younger guy heading into his age 26 season. So yeah, he put up some very solid whole package numbers last year, was an above average hitter, great on the bases, and great on defense as well, which, garners him a top 10 position for me. Who do you have as your number 10?
So in my 10, I put a guy who had a down year last year, but looked good in 2022. I put Andres Jimenez in my 10. Batted ball profile looks pretty bad, but his defense was pretty outstanding last year, as it's been for the last few years. And I mean, his defense almost by itself earned him a top 10 spot here. 14.9 defensive runs above average last year, 12 in 2022, 100th percentile in outs above average at 18, and also a 93rd percentile sprint speed, and an 84th percentile base running run value, along with a 99th percentile fielding run value. So across the board, he is among the best defenders in all of baseball. And he did have a 6-win season in 2022, a random 142 weighted runs created plus, which I think we kind of figured wasn't quite sustainable, and he regressed down to a 97. But you know what? Being a league average hitter is all he needs to do with his other skill set to be a 3.5 win player every year. And I think that's good enough for top 10 at the position. And I have no reason to believe he can't do that again next year. So as long as he stays between 95 to 105 weighted runs created plus, and anything higher than 105 would be excellent. But with that defense and base running, I think there's a fair case that he's a top 10 hitter or top 10 player at second base. He also dropped his strikeout rate last year by 2%. Walk rate has remained relatively consistent. And yeah, I have Andres Jimenez in my 10.
Yes, shout out Andres Jimenez. My number 9 is this might be controversial, but I'm talking about Luis Arraez, who, great offensive pedigree, even disregarding he's got back-to-back batting titles, which obviously, has its merit, but isn't everything. Still, sabermetrically speaking, also a very, very good hitter. 131 OPS plus over the last 2 seasons from Luis Arraez, and he has the second highest OPS among second basemen with 800 plus plate appearances over the last 2 years. However, why I don't have him higher is that defense and that base running. He has a 36% extra base taken rate over the last 2 years and is 7 for 13 on stolen bases. So just an overall negative on the bases when he does get on, which is a high amount of time nonetheless. But also in 2023, he had negative 13 outs above average. Although I will say maybe in defense of him, defensive metrics are very, very weird on him. He has negative 38 career outs above average, but positive 8 career defensive run saves. So defensive run saves actually views him as a good defender, but outs above average has him very negatively. And I kind of trust that more just based on like, he's not as athletic as a lot of the other players on this list. So I kind of trust the outs above average a little bit more. Um, but yeah, that offensive pedigree is high, but obviously batting averages and everything, and defense and base running does matter. I know I think Mike Petriello and MLB Network each had him in their top 5. So yeah, it might be a little bit of a hot take to put him at number 9. Who do you have as your number 9?
Chris, it is not a hot take. Put Luis Ariz at number 9. I have him there too. Yeah. You pretty much nailed it. You said everything that I was going to say. Certainly he is an anomaly of a hitter, right? A 5.5% strikeout rate is absurd. No matter what the year is, right? I mean, that's the kind of stuff we would look at from a guy in like 1881 and be like, man, a 5% strikeout rate, how do you do that? Well, Luis Ariz did it last year. Casually put up a 393 on base percentage. And yeah, the offense is awesome. It's gonna be very, very hard for him to replicate. Yeah, I mean, he is a very good hitter. He's, there are certain skill sets within hitting that he is better at than anybody else in baseball. It's still very hard to maintain a 31% line drive rate, with the, additionally, everything else that comes with that. But yeah, in terms of the defense and the base running, the defense particularly, I thought that his defense was going to improve because he was moving from first base over to second base between 2022 and 23. He played a lot of first base in 2022. I figured that moving to second base would help him out a lot. It didn't. He had, relatively similar defensive numbers at second base, which is definitely a cause for concern because, bad defense at first base is the default, but bad defense at second base is you're one of the worst in the league at it. And that's kind of what he was last year. And yeah, that is why I had him at number 9. The defense is very concerning coming from a defense heavy position. And it is Luis Ariz. He's the best at certain skill sets of hitting in all of baseball, but those skill sets are very, very hard to sustain.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, what I'll say about Arise is like there's only a couple guys on this list that I would take I would take their hitting over him, and hitting as a whole package, OPS,
Yeah.
slugging,
If
and
if we were
whatnot.
talking about hitting, I would at least put him in number 5 at the very worst.
Yeah, 100%. Like his hitting prowess is very, very good. Um, but yeah, and I'm trying to just wanted to add another point and seeing how many games he played at first base in 2022. But yeah, he played first base. He played first base on the Twins, who had Jorge Polanco at second base, who's also a negative defender. So they put a negative defender above Luis Ariz with the Twins. So if that that's kind of where the teams evaluated him, is like that. Okay, he's more of a first baseman than like Jorge Polanco would be, who's just like not a good defender either. And maybe that's why I compared the two earlier in the show. But just one moment, please. Yeah, he played 65 games at first base in 2022 as opposed to
Like 30 something games at second, right?
41. So close, yeah,
41.
pretty close. So yeah, like they had Jorge Polanco playing against him, which speaks measures because he's a negative defender. And that leads into my number 8 pick, who is sort of similar to Luis Ariz, except a little bit better defense. I'm talking about Ketel Marte, who, yeah, it was a Marte Parte last year. He had a very good year last year. Looking at the longer term scale, he had a 118. He has a 118 OPS plus over the last 2 seasons. And last year, that OPS plus was 128, which was very, very good, and also had positive defense, and was 4th in FWAR among second basemen last year, or at least among second basemen who played half their games at the position. And And Saber, underlying numbers wise, very good as well. Was 70th percentile or higher in strikeout rate, walk rate, whiff rate, chase rate, and expected WOBA. So yeah, with Ketel Marte, like he's an interesting player because we thought he was going to be a breakout, especially after his 2019 where he finished fourth in the MVP. He kind of regressed after that, but he's sort of had a little bit of a career revival. And, you can do that when when you start out as well as young as he was. He's still like, kind of in the middle of his career. So, yeah, him improving his offensive numbers was very encouraging last year. For me to rank him a little bit higher, I need to see him to repeat that success. Who do you have as your number 8?
I also have Ketel Marte in my 8. Yeah, we're
Wow.
agreeing pretty strongly on this list so far. Yeah, Ketel Marte, in terms of people, I'd say from like 4 through 10 on this list, is one of the most balanced shortstops in baseball in terms of having a more diverse skill set than most others, right? I mean, he has a very good offensive profile. His he hits the ball. Uh, at a first of all, 91 mile per hour exit velocity. That's obviously very good in 465 plate appearances coming from the second base position, and he's kind of consistently been in that range since 2019. He's had a exit velocity over 90 in 4 of the last 5 seasons. He also keeps the ball off the ground pretty good enough. His ground ball rate has always been around the league average, maybe a little above, maybe a little below. So his batted ball profile has been pretty average. And defense, he's been above average, at the position. Generally speaking, in terms of outs above average, he had his best year since 2018 in 2023. So that's good. His base running has always been fine. Yeah, I don't know. That's I mean, another thing, he's very good with striking out and walking. He had a 10.9 strikeout, or excuse me, a 10.9 walk rate last year, which was the highest of his career. And he had a 16.8% strikeout rate, down a couple percent from 2022. Yeah, I don't know. Ketel Marte's just been kind of weirdly consistent to the point where there's just not much to really say, it feels like.
Right, right. And
But I do have him in my 8.
yeah, when I was talking about 70th percentile, I forgot to mention average exit velocity, which you talked about 91 miles per hour. He also, yeah,
Mm.
was I think 77th percentile in average exit velocity or something like that. But yeah, now on to my number 7, who a guy has a high profile. Um, I think fans really like him, might rank him higher, but also MLB Network left him completely off their top 10, if I'm not mistaken. But for my number 7, I'm talking about Ozzy Albies, the Braves second baseman who had a 124 OPS plus last year and the fifth most F4 among second basemen last year. Also a 63% extra base taken rate. As we talked about before, that's going first to third on singles, first to home on doubles, second to home on singles. And Ozzy Albies was 21 percentage points above league average last year, which is pretty remarkable. Where a lot of people may have concern is that defense, outs above average wise, he went from +4 to -10 from 2022 to 2023. However, his defensive runs saved actually increased. So it kind of goes to my narrative of like single year defensive numbers can be a little bit squirrely. And I think that outs above average drop might be a little bit weird. And maybe he's not a +4 outs above average guy, but I can't imagine he's going to repeat a -10 outs above average guy, or repeat as a guy who has -10 outs above average. And if he does, he'll go down this list. But I'll need to see that happen for me to take that, or for me to consider his defense as heavily as that. But yeah, considering offense and how he had a 124 OPS plus last year and the fifth most F4 among second basemen, yeah, I put him number 7. Who do you have as your 7?
I have a guy that you put at number 10. I put Bryson Stott in my 7. Uh, he did. There are things that I really like that he did last year. He increased his line drive rate by 25%. And with guys like Bryson Stott, I feel like their offensive profile is really determined by how good their line drive rate is. If you're not going to hit for power, at least hit for average as best as you can. And the way to do that is by hitting line drives, because not only is it good for hitting for average, but also get a lot of you'll get some extra bases out of that as well. If you're quick enough, you're good at placing the ball enough. And Bryson Stott, did that a lot better last year. He also is, tremendous at defense. And, I mean, he certainly makes a difference on a team that has been desperate for defense for a few years now in Philadelphia. Um, but also, doesn't strike out really a whole lot, 15.6%, whiffs at 15.1%. Sweet spot rate is very good, 36.4%. That's a few percent above the league average. Base running, he's very good. And I mean, I feel like, there are a lot of second basemen that have not great overall offensive profiles. Bryson Stott, I think, is a little better in terms of his batted balls. I think last year he put up a 748 OPS, and I think that's pretty similar to what he's capable of in the long run. Um,
Right, right.
on top of that, very good defender, very good base runner. And I mean, an absolute difference maker in Philadelphia. The biggest improvement that he made was fastballs. In 2022, he had a minus 14 run value against fastballs, against four seamers. He hit 178, slugged 281. Expected numbers were also very uninspiring. But in 2023, he hit 286, slugged 427. And that's the pitch you're seeing the most. So being able to make that kind of improvement is huge. And if he can do that again, he doesn't even really need to be a crazy good offensive player. He just has to be maybe I'd like to see like 105 to 110 and in weighted runs created plus, and then obviously defense and base running if he just keeps doing what he's doing. I think seven's a very appropriate place for him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, talk about yeah. Bryson Stott is really a was really a whole package guy last year, and for that reason, you might get undervalued from the fans' perspective. But I mean, yeah, top five among all fielders and outs above average, and 31 for 34 on stolen bases. Yeah, he was tremendous away from the plate and was above average at the plate. My number six. So I think this confirms that we have the same 10 because my number six is your number 10. I'm talking about Andres Jimenez, who I think there's some other candidates, but I think he is the best fielder of this group. He has the most defensive runs above average among second basemen the last two seasons, and he also has won back-to-back Gold Gloves, so the writers agree on it as well. And then on the bases, he is also 50 for 59 on stolen bases the last two seasons and has a 47% extra base taken rate and 5.9 BSR over the last 2 years. Obviously, where everyone would be alarmed and understandably so is that hitting, where his OPS took a 125 point drop from 2022 to 2023. And even expected numbers wise, that took a drop as well. His expected WOBA dropped 29 points. And a lot of that had to do with him hitting the ball a lot softer. His average exit velocity was like third percentile or maybe even worse. And that average exit velocity dropped 3 miles per hour. However, with that being so dramatic and so uncharacteristic from the rest of his career, I feel like that may level out and that may increase, that may, if he does level it out, that will increase his hitting production. And then, if that's added to his already amazing defensive prowess and solid base running, that is a really good second baseman to have. And also to consider with Andres Jimenez, like with how successful he was so early on, he's still a guy heading into his age 25 season. Like he is very, very young and can easily figure some things out, to improve his game and get closer to that 2022 level. Who do you have as your number six?
At number 6, I have Ozzy Albies. You put him at 7, so we're pretty close on him. Yeah, I thought putting him at 6 was going to be a hot take, and then MLB Network completely left him off their list. So that was pretty shocking. I have 4.5 minutes to do this. Should be fine. Ozzy Albies has been one of the most consistent bats at the second base position for the last few years, and last year was no different. He's one of those guys, like kind of like Jorge Polanco, where I talked about earlier, where even if you don't have the most power, as long as you have like a fair enough average exit velocity, if you can hit enough fly balls and pull the ball enough, you'll find your way into enough home runs. And Ozzy Albies did exactly that. He had a 33.8% fly ball rate last year. That's 10% above the league average. He pulled the ball at a 51.7% rate last year. The league average is 37%. And what did he do? He hit 33 home runs. Yes, his expected slugging is about 50 points below his actual slugging, but that's kind of just what happens. You pull the ball enough, hit the ball hard enough, even if you're just like even a little bit below league average in average exit velocity, you'll be fine. And that's exactly what he did. I did have to knock him down for his defense, though. He is in the second percentile in outs above average. He had -6 defensive runs above average last year. And his base running has been still very good, but the fielding for me is what did it. But yeah, I mean, he has been one of the most consistent bats at the second base position. And, I think he fits very nicely in that Braves lineup. He, despite, being a what is he, 5'8" and 165 pounds. I mean, he's still putting up 30 home run seasons just because he hits enough pulled fly balls to do it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And especially when he's hitting lefty, he's a switch hitter, as most people know, but as a lefty hitting it pole side, like I think it's 325 to the right field foul
Hmm.
pole over at Truist Park. So as someone who did a pitcher career mode as a Braves player, that was very frustrating, but in MLB the Show. But when you're a hitter, it benefits you tremendously. So having those pulled fly balls is great, especially when you're a left-handed hitter. And for Ozzy Albies, he was tied for 11th in terms of most pulled fly balls last season. So that adds to your point there. And for my number 5, he makes a pretty good chant. Ha Song Kim. Ha Song Kim. Shout out to the 2022 playoffs. But yeah, he's my number 5. Shout out my 2023 Padres player to watch, which wasn't the most risky pick, but I did want to give him a shout out because yeah, he's the top 5 second baseman in baseball as far as I have it this year. Over the last 2 years, and this has been not only last year's production but the year before as well. For much of last year, he was like an MVP candidate, or at least for the nerds, he was. Dropped off a little bit towards the end, but still a very, very good season. And over the last 2 seasons, he is averaging a 107 OPS plus, 54% extra base taken rate, which is 12 percentage points above league average, and 8.5 outs above average, 14 defensive runs saved, and 25 stolen bases per year. That's what he's averaging over the last 2 seasons. He benefited from the rule changes from a base running front. He went from 12 to 38 stolen bases last year, and he was 6th among second basemen in F4, or he's been 6th among second basemen in F4 over the last 2 seasons, and he was 3rd last season. And there's some things to be very optimistic on with his offensive game over the last couple of years. He has increased his walk rate and sweet spot rate and decreased his pop-up rate in both 2022 and 2023. So he made those numbers better in 2022 and then made them better once again the next season. So that's very encouraging. And then when considering his elite base running and defense, that puts him over the edge as a top 5 guy for me. Who do you have as your number 5?
I also have Ha-Sung Kim in my 5. I think there's a chance we might have the same top 5.
Yeah.
It's very possible. Yeah, I mean, you said it. I mean, he's among the best defenders in the league, certainly the best at his position. I mean, the fact that they had to kick Fernando Tatis Jr. to the outfield to make room for him in the middle infield kind of says, I feel like everything you need to know about his defense, right? They had to have him in the lineup, or at least on the diamond, because he is a difference maker out there for the Padres. And yeah, he was a league average bat last year. Expected statistics suggest he's going to be a little less, but that's all right, because that's only expected statistics are very rarely 1-to-1 with what actually happens. When they are, it's kind of a story that we point out. But I mean, all of the little things he does very well. Sweet spot rate was very high last year. Line drive rate around league average. All of his batted ball profile was pretty close to league average last year. But K to walk ratio is very good. Only a 19.8% strikeout rate, 12% walk rate. Yeah, I mean, it was just a very tremendous year for him, and yeah, MVP candidate for some of the season, which was a pretty fun development for the few weeks that lasted. Yeah, I mean, I feel like everything that I was gonna say you already said. Yeah, House on Cam I have in my 5.
Yeah, that's the tough thing about going second in these lists is sometimes you're bound to sort of repeat what the other said or be have your dialogue reduced a little bit. My number four is yeah likely your number four as well. Talking about Nico Horner of the Chicago Cubs. He's like when we talked about some of the guys before in this list that um you know some of these guys ahead of like Luis Ariz or Ketel Marte, they're gonna have worse hitting numbers, but they're gonna have way better base running and defensive numbers. And Nico Horner is like the prime example of that. He's been like an average hitter over the past 2 years, but he has been the best base runner of this group and one of the best defenders of the group. He has the most stolen bases and BSR among second basemen over the last 2 seasons, and the second most defensive runs above average among current second basemen. And over the last 2 years, he has the fourth most FWAR, and he had the third most FWAR last year. 43 stolen bases last year was pretty tremendous while only getting caught 7 times. The year before, he was 20 for 22 on stolen bases, and yeah, was or might have been a Gold Glover last year. Well, being an average hitter and elite base runner. So, yeah, pretty stellar, just overall player. Have to look at the whole package when you're talking about Nico Horner, and that whole package reveals he is a very good player. Who is your number four?
You nailed it. Yep, I have Nico Horner in my four as well. Again, he's very good at several different aspects of baseball. He's a tremendous defender at the position, and also a tremendous base runner. Yeah, I mean the best base runner out of the group probably, but also outside of Luis Ariz, maybe the best at contact. I mean, a 99th percentile whiff rate as a hitter at only 12.4%, a 96th percentile strikeout rate at 12.11%. And he actually has some of the smallest discrepancies between his actual numbers and his expected numbers from last year. His expected slugging was 355, which is not good by any means, but he only slugged 383. And his batting average was high enough, and his walk rate was like okay enough to where he put up a 346 OBP, which I'm not complaining about. That's gonna care. That's probably definitely gonna carry his OPS a little more than his slugging does, even if his slugging is, technically a higher number. But regardless, I think he's very good with that. Going deeper into his strikeout stuff in particular, um, he had an 8% strikeout rate against four-seam fastballs last year, which ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th best. Minimum 150 plate appearances ending on four-seam fastballs. That is a list of 132 hitters, in which again Nico Horner ranked 5th. Uh, so he's very good at contact, and not to mention he also hit 307 against four seamers last year with a 470 slugging, and his expected numbers were off that, but still not that far off. So that was something he did a very good job of last year. A lot of the reason I put him in my four is because again, the pitcher seeing the most is four seamers in 99% of circumstances. So if you can hit those very well, you're going to find your way into good numbers. And that's what Nico Horner's done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, shout out Nico Horner. Also, he was my second baseman in the MLB All Underrated team. And based on some of the rankings I've seen, I think that holds some merit. So yeah, that definitely holds some merit because MLB Network had him number 10 on the list. And I think that's a little bit unfair towards Mr. Horner. So now on to my number three, which will likely be another overlap and very understandably so because of how kind of concrete things are over here in the top three. I'm talking about Marcus Semien, a 2023 MVP finalist, Marcus Semien, and also the health king. Just playing 160 games like it's nothing. But nonetheless, Marcus Semien is second among second basemen in FWAR over the last 2 seasons. He led second baseman in FWAR last year, and he had a 122 OPS plus, 15 outs above average, and 16 defensive runs saved last year. It's that elite defense that guys like Horner, Stott, Jimenez were providing, but much better hitting. So that's what puts him over the edge. And over the last 2 years, he has a 55% extra base taken rate, which is elite. And he is third among current projected second baseman in BSR over the last 2 years. So yeah, like just he's another whole package guy, but also has the hitting to go with it. And yeah, like elite guy, and also just as an aside, not even making my case for him, he had the most pulled fly balls last year at 77. Next best was 59. He had 18 more pulled fly balls than the next highest hitter. So yeah. But all that being said, just an elite second baseman and one of the best players in the game. Who do you have number 3?
This is actually not an overlap, believe it or not. I put
Oh.
Jose Altuve in my 3. I'm sure you have him in your 2. And yeah, I there was a lot of things that kind of concerned me with him last year. I mean, he obviously did play coming off of an injury. He hurt his wrist playing in the World Baseball Classic after getting hit by a pitch, I believe it was, right? And, and he put together a season where he had his highest strikeout rate in a full season since at least before the Statcast era. He also put up his highest ground ball rate by 8% over last year. He went from 41% to 49.3% ground ball rate last year. That's his highest ground ball rate in a full season since 2019. He had his lowest fly ball rate since 2017, which, to be fair, pretty good year for him. But also his lowest line drive rate in a full season again since 2019. So I do want to see a bit of a better batted ball profile out of him in the next year. He's going into age 34 now, and he's like one of the last hopes we have for a while to get to 3,000 hits. He got to 2,000 last season. Um, so in terms of that, I feel like there are some improvements for him to get back to in terms of his batted ball profile. He's still doing very well with striking out, with walking, with swinging and missing. Still very elite in those respects. However, he did also chase quite a bit last year. He had a 32% chase rate, 4% up from 2022. His highest in a full season at since 2015. So, there were some things where he may have regressed a bit. But certainly it's Jose Altuve, so it's very possible he can get back there. But yeah, I did put him in my 3 for those reasons. But obviously, right? I mean, he is still at number 3 for a reason. He's put up back-to-back 900 OPS seasons, even if it was only 410 plate appearances last year. He's a guy that has always outperformed his expected numbers. But there are actual batted ball differences here that I do worry about a bit going into the future.
Right. And yeah, he greatly outperformed his expected numbers last year. I think, yeah, it was a 62-point difference in WOBA and expected WOBA. Usually he outperforms it by around 30. So there could be definitely some regression, especially based on those underlying numbers you were talking about with the batted ball profile. But why I have Jose Altuve at number 2 is just that pedigree he has, even through injuries. Leads second baseman in F4 over the last 2 seasons, despite missing 72 games last year. So definitely on a game per game basis, he's been far and away the best second baseman over the last 2 years. And leads in F4, even considering the amount of games he and the rest of the competition have played. And among second basemen with 800 plus plate appearances over the last 2 years, Altuve has the highest OPS by 89 points. And that is while having fairly neutral defense and base running. So not something that's going to hold him back in this conversation like Luis, that conversation would hold him back with Luis Arraez. Like Luis Arraez had the second highest OPS in that group, but his defense and base running holds him back. Not the case with Jose Altuve. He has the elite offense while not being a detriment defensively or on the bases. So yeah, I mean, I think what has him so high for me is just he is like among the players who have played second base, he's been so much better than the rest of the competition at the plate. So now on to your number 2. Yeah, your number 2.
My number 2, this is where I put Marcus Semien. You had him in your 3, so we did flip flop on Altuve and Simeon, and I feel like they are pretty interchangeable. But nonetheless, I did put Simeon at 2. A 35.4% ground ball rate and a 46.9% pull rate. And like I've said repeatedly, you pull the ball enough, you hit it in the air enough, you'll find your way into the count statistics. For Marcus Simeon, that was 29 home runs last year at age 32. You know, he had, when he signed that contract with the Rangers, a lot of people questioned how, if it was going to work out and how soon was his potential decline going to be. And he's really only gotten better in many respects. In terms of defense, he just put up his 99th percentile. That's above average. He was as low as first percentile in 2020, and he only had one good defensive season before 2021 when he played his Blue Jays season. So something changed with his defense when he left Oakland, but I mean, he's been incredible defensively, no matter where you look, really. Um, and he's also gotten better with striking out. He just had his lowest strikeout rate in a season, at least in the Statcast era, at 14%. He had his highest walk rate in a full season since 2019 at 9.6% last year. Sweet spot rate, his highest since 2017, a 37.5% sweet spot rate. Also, base running is still very good as well. Despite being 32, he's still at 85th percentile sprint speed. He's making smart base running decisions, like you mentioned. Obviously, he's not hitting the ball super hard. His expected numbers are naturally going to be lower than his actual numbers because of his hitting style. A lot of pulled fly balls. But other than that, there was really nothing that he hasn't excelled in and that he didn't excel in last year. And yeah, also being available, right? He did this despite 753 plate appearances. Didn't really look worn down in the postseason either. Still hit very well there. And yeah, I have Marcus Semien in my 2.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, you mentioned that defensive improvement since 2021. He probably just has been built more as a second baseman than a
He
shortstop.
probably has been because he was playing shortstop in Oakland.
Yeah, he was a primarily a shortstop before he arrived in Toronto, and then he ran into Bo Bichette, and then when he goes to the Rangers, Corey Seager gets signed as well, so he's not going to be the shortstop. But it seems like it's been positive for Marcus Semien's career to be a second baseman, because at shortstop he was kind of a whatever defender compared to the rest of the league, at least, and now he's an elite second base defender. So yeah, happy for him in that respect. My number one, and I'm sure your number one as well, is a guy who has not been a primary second baseman since the minors, but he is coming back, and he is going to be the primary second baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and it's one of the best players in all of baseball. That is Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts trails only Aaron Judge and Freddie Freeman in position player F4 among all players over the last 2 seasons. He was also second among all position players in F4 last season. Over the last 2 years, he has a 152 OPS plus, and last year he had a 163 OPS plus. From 2022 to 2023, he increased his average exit velocity 1.9 miles per hour and line drive rate 6.3 percentage points. So despite him being in the league for almost a decade now, he's still found a way to make improvements, which is very, very encouraging. Also, with considering his amount of time in the league, still pretty young, still in his early 30s, and doesn't seem to be getting any worse, and seems to be getting better. And last year was just an exclamation point of a season. He was 94th percentile or higher in average exit velocity, sweet spot rate, chase rate, and all expected numbers. So along with him getting a 987 OPS, 163 OPS plus, and 39 home runs, the process results were also still there. Like, he was elite in the underlying numbers as well as the on the surface numbers, which the on the surface numbers got him to be a MVP runner up. But those process numbers are going to probably keep him around that level. So he is definitely the number one second baseman in all of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how much there is for me to add. It's kind of a given, right? I mean, we all know how good Mookie Betts is. We all know that he's quite far above anyone else listed at the second base position. And I mean, the defense will definitely be interesting this year. You know, we had actually a down year defensively in the outfield, but you can't even really look at defensive numbers to evaluate his case here because he just hasn't played a lot of second base, or at least recently. But offensively, he's everything, literally everything. The worst percentile on his batting is 82nd percentile barrel rate, um, which is a joke. I mean, it's absolutely insane. He's another guy that hits fastballs extremely well. Uh, a run value per 100 over 2 in four-seam fastballs over the last 2 years, respectively. That is insane. That's very hard to do. Also, a 2 run value per 100 in sinkers and sliders. So there's really not a pitch that you can get by him. And you know he's elite against several different pitches. And again, you know, high pull rate, high fly ball rate, very low ground ball rate, 27.6%. He has a higher line drive rate than ground ball rate, which is like outrageous, like just completely insane. Um, yeah, I mean Mookie Betts is number one.
Right. Yeah. And to go to his fielding, he played 70 games at second and started 62 games there, played 485 innings there. And it looks like he had 6 defensive runs saved there. Outs above average was a little bit more hesitant on him, but still, like, that means that he is not, he didn't take much adjusting to the second base position when he did play second base last year. And yeah, heading into his age 31 season, which is pretty remarkable. And yeah, like, just as an aside, maybe, non-analytically speaking, like, Mookie Betts is one of the rare players that makes the game of baseball look easy. It just seems to all come naturally to him. He's also, not of overwhelming size, only 5'9". He's listed at 180 pounds, but still manages to hit 39 home runs last year. Speeds around the bases really well, plays really good defense. When his swing is very short, but still very strong. And it just seems to come very naturally to him. So, yeah, I miss him, but
Yeah,
I love, but it's still great to watch him and have him succeed. And, we also talked about, um, the, Hall of Famers playing right now, or like, who, if they retired, would get in. Like, Mookie Betts is in that category for me right now. Like, if he retired right now, he's a Hall of Famer. He's earned that. He has 64 wins above replacement right now. Unbelievable. So, yeah, shout out to Mookie Betts. Yeah, want to give out your 10 through 1 here?
sure. Number 10, I had Andres Jimenez. Number 9, Luis Ariz. Number 8, Ketel Marte. Number 7, Bryson Stott. Number 6, Ozzy Albies. Number 5, Ha-Sung Kim. Number 4, Nico Horner. Number 3, Jose Altuve. Number 2, Marcus Semien. Number 1, Mookie Betts. My honorable mentions, Zach Geloff and Tyro Estrada.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, Estrada was interesting, especially with his defensive numbers the way they were.
Yep.
Yeah, my number 10 was Bryson Stott. Number 9 was Luis Ariz. Number 8, Ketel Marte. Number 7 was Ozzy Albies. 6 was Andres Jimenez. Number 5, Ha-Sung Kim. Number 4, Nico Horner. Number 3, Marcus Semien. Number 2, Jose Altuve. And number 1, Mookie Betts. So, albeit different order, we had the same 10, which yeah, very different from the relief pitchers, because yeah, this was sort of easier to get a grasp of at second base. But yeah, anything more before we wrap this up?